Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today is a very special episode of Splat from the Past. I will be interviewing Julie Paris, the daughter of legendary actor, writer, producer, director Jerry Paris. For those of you who don't know, Jerry Paris, he was a Renaissance man in show business. The guy had a career like no other. You know, I mean, he comes from that generation of Renaissance men like Mickey Rooney and Sammy Davis Jr., guys who did it all. And I love guys that did it all because I do it all. And so I'm having her on the show today to talk about his career. He acted in such classic movies as The Wild One, The Cane Mutiny. He made a name for himself on the Dick Van Dyke Show as Jerry the Dentist. And he directed many classic movies and TV shows, nearly every episode of Happy Days. He directed Police Academy 2 and 3, childhood favorite, and the unsold Western comedy pilot, Evil Roy Slade. Just so many great stuff he was involved in. And I'm going to have him on the show today. I'm going to have Julie on the show today to talk to her about all that stuff. So, here is my interview with Julie Paris. So, Julie, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am just wonderful. It's such an honor to be talking to you today, and thank you for taking the time.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yes. So, your father, Jerry Paris, was a Renaissance man in show business, actor, writer, producer, director. What can you tell me about his background?
Well, he was born in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother brought him and his older brother when he was 3 to Los Angeles, where she married Milton Grossman, who ended up being quite a well-known movie agent.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad was raised with his brother and his half-sister, Gloria, in Beverly Hills. He was born in 25. So he was there in the late 20s, all through the 30s and 40s. He went to Beverly Hills High School. He went to the Navy. He went into the Navy, I guess, in 45. And when he came out, he went to New York and studied with the Neighborhood Playhouse, which was an acting group back in the 50s. And he studied with Marlon Brando, and I think Marilyn Monroe might have been one of his classes. It's a very exciting time in New York in the early 50s.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm from San Francisco, too, and he's just a couple years younger than my grandmother.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. He came back to California because he wanted to get into the movies. He wanted to act in the movies, and he did a few movies. He did The Wild One. He did Marty, which was very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Cane Mutiny, and met my mother and got married in the 50s. And he was a freelance actor, and my mother was a school teacher, and he said, "Don't worry, I promise I'll always have food on the table for you and the kids."
Oh.
So he was lucky enough to, I think he was at the Hollywood Park racetrack, and he had some affiliation with Sheldon Leonard. And Sheldon said, "Hey, I'm doing a new show with a guy named Dick Van Dyke, and I think he'd be perfect for the next door neighbor." It was at a time in Hollywood very different than now. It was a much smaller circle of people.
Right.
And when he went in for the reading, they said, "Now we're looking for someone to play your wife." And he said, "My best friend's wife is a terrific actress. She'd be great." And that was Anne Morgan Gilbert. So they both got the parts, and he did that for a year. And then he went up to Carl Reiner and said, "What I really would like to do is give a shot at directing." And Carl said, "All right, well, I'll let you try it." So he gave him one episode. And that was it. He did the next 4 years.
Wow.
And he found his passion.
Wow.
So that was that. That's how he got into directing.
He also served in the U.S. Navy during the war.
Yes, he did.
Was he ever in battle?
Well, he went to Okinawa. I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you. He was in Okinawa. I know he was, I don't know. Isn't that terrible that I wouldn't know? He's been gone a long time. Both my parents passed away in the 80s. And so I don't have a chance to ask them a lot of those questions anymore.
Yeah. So when he was at the Actors Studio, was Lee Strasberg his teacher?
Yes. Yes, he was. A lot of these questions, my brother is going to have probably a more accurate memory than I do. He was with Strasberg, and it was just in the beginning of that whole period of time when acting became more truthful and real, and the method, and it was a very exciting time.
Wow. And what year did he permanently move out to L.A. to pursue acting?
Well, I suppose the early 50s, 51, 52, 53.
Mm-hmm.
He did quite a few movies in those years, and then he met my mother in 54, and did a few more movies. He did Naked and the Dead when I think my mother was pregnant with me. But the big ones were Marty and The Wild One, The Cane Mutiny, D-Day. It was a really great special time.
Yeah. Oh, he did work in classics like Battleground, DOA, Cyrano de Bergerac,
Yes,
Bright Victory.
yes.
Wow. He even did Bonzo Goes to College.
He sure did, and he became friends with Ronald Reagan, who actually lived in our neighborhood when we were growing up.
Wow.
And he, before Ronald Reagan went into politics, he was a Democrat, and
Yeah.
and he actually, when my father was gray-listed in the early 50s, Ronald Reagan went in and said, Jerry Paris is not a communist. I can assure you of that. So he was very nice. Did that for my dad.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is gray list the opposite of blacklist?
It is actually exactly the way it sounds. You're not on the blacklist, but you're being considered a communist. So you're not on the blacklist, but you're not completely innocent. He had dated a girl in high school whose father was a communist. So just that affiliation made him, a suspect, which was silly.
Oh, yeah, that was a crazy time. And all the people who were blacklisted, they had huge comeback careers by the 60s.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So many
of them. It was that wonderful movie that Marty Ritt directed. I can't remember the name of it. With Zero Mostel. All about the blacklist.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific movie.
Yeah. He did The Wild One with Brando and Lee Marvin. Did he ever tell you any stories about that?
Well, that was a very exciting time. I mean, I don't think The Wild One was even allowed to be shown in certain countries. It was considered very dark.
Yeah.
If you watch it today, it looks so silly. The motorcycles, the black leather jackets, the hoodlums that they were, the intimidation. It was really looked upon as a seriously dark movie at the time, which is so funny when you see how far we've come.
Yeah.
He loved working on The Wild One. He loved it. I think it was a lot of fun. He had worked and studied with Brando before, so that was fun. And Lee Marvin ended up being one of our neighbors as well. So
Oh, wow.
His father was one of my friends growing up. So, like I said, it was a small world back then.
Yeah, that must have been interesting, being around Lee Marvin. I heard he liked to drink a lot.
Yeah, I don't remember that. My dad did learn how to ride the motorcycle, and he really loved that. So I can remember when I was a little girl at the elementary school, he would just decide to rent a motorcycle for the day, and he would pick my brother and I up, put us on the back, and off we went. It was very exciting. My dad was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. The Wild One was like the first biker movie ever made.
I think so, and why it was looked upon as a bit threatening for certain people. And, the time period, the early 50s, it was a very conservative time.
Yeah, and I think there was a disclaimer at the beginning of the movie, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Something like, this movie is not meant to shock, or something like that.
Oh, my gosh. You think it was Quentin Tarantino?
Oh, yeah. He did the Cane Mutiny. Did he have any stories about that?
Well, my dad didn't do very well on boats. He got seasick a lot. And they were on the boat, and he was in his whites, in his uniform, and they were doing a scene, and all of a sudden he just started turning green, and he looked at his co-star, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and he grabbed his hat, and he threw up in his hat. That's what I remember.
Oh, my God. That's funny. Yeah. He was also in 0 Hour, which later became the basis for the Airplane movies.
Really? Oh, yeah. He did a lot of flying as well. I'll tell you, my brother Andrew is a historian, and he knows a lot and remembers a lot more, probably because he's my father's son. I also have an older brother, Tony, who remembers a lot as well. And I know they'd both be happy to speak with you. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm the least knowledgeable of all. But one thing that's funny, a funny story, my parents met. My dad was doing a movie in Chino, at the Chino State Prison in Northern California, well, Central California, and it was called Unchained. And they mix the actors in with the inmates. And my mother was a school teacher there in Chino. And the bellboy at the hotel where the actors were staying said to my mom, who was his friend, "Why don't we go watch some of the shooting of the movie they're doing at the prison?" She said, "Okay." So they went. And like I said, they mixed in the inmates with the actors, and he was behind bars. And he thought she was very cute, and he kind of flirted with her and said, "Hey, I'd really like to, see you." She said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You're behind bars." He said, "No, I'm an actor." And she said, "I'm sorry, there's no way for me to believe you." And he said, "Come to the hotel lobby tonight, and I'll pick you up." And that was the beginning, and the rest is history. So when people say, "How did your parents meet?" I always say they met in jail.
That's a really good analogy.
And he was right off from working on the Wild One. So he had the motorcycle and the black leather jacket, and he was still into that role. And she was this Midwesterner from Chicago, from Illinois, and very, just a teacher. So that he was very, very exciting and different to her. And they were married until they both died.
Wow. So being a guy who likes motorcycles and leather jackets and stuff, it's no wonder that he directed nearly every episode of Happy Days, because he could probably relate to Fonzie.
Yes, they had a great time on Happy Days. They had a great run with Van Dyke Show, and then he got 11 wonderful years with Happy Days, which was really terrific. They were a very close, just like the Dick Van Dyke Show, they were a very close cast. The young men in the Happy Days, they were they were teenagers, pretty much, maybe 19, 20 years old. Ron Howard was at USC. He was a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Winkler was a little older. He was about 28 or so. But so they were really young and impressionable, and they were crazy about my dad, and I think they were at our house every weekend. A few of them were not, like Don Most, he wasn't even from California, so he didn't know any. He was at our house all the time. Henry was at our house all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really fun, the 70s were really fun. A lot of fun at our house.
Yeah, I met Anson Williams at a Comic-Con last week. He was a great guy.
He's very nice. They're all really, really nice people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so when he got the Dick Van Dyke Show and he started directing, was he at a point in his career where he got tired of auditioning and getting passed over for somebody else?
Well, he was never a leading man. He was always a character actor, and he always knew that's, was where he would fit in. I think it wasn't that he was tired of acting. I think this passion for directing took over. Just doing the whole play, getting everyone in, but it's so much more fascinating for him than just thinking about yourself and your role and how you're relating and reacting to one other person. This is like doing a play. You're the captain of the ship, and he really loved that. So I don't think, he was always acting. Directing is a little bit like performing. He was always very enthusiastic and funny. So I don't think he missed acting. And just to keep his Screen Actors Guild card alive, I think he put himself in, a one-liner once a year so that he could keep his membership up.
Did he have any directorial mentors that he drew from?
Well, John Rich was the director before him.
The infamous John Rich, yeah.
Yeah, and I know he liked him very much. I can't think of anyone offhand. I don't know who the big... Oh, well, who directed Marty?
Oh,
Patty Chayefsky wrote it, and he was crazy about Patty Chayefsky. I don't remember who... Oh, was it...
I know Burt Lancaster produced it. Let me look it up here. Oh, it was Delbert Mann.
Yes, he loved Delbert Mann. He loved him. That was another one that he used to talk about.
Nice.
Mostly he talked about himself. He was the center of the family.
Mm-hmm. He directed one of my favorite episodes of The Munsters. It was the one where Herman is a baseball player.
That was a funny show.
Yeah. Herman, he hits the ball, and he makes the pitcher do backflips.
He did a lot of those sitcoms in the 60s. After the Dick Van Dyke Show, he wanted to do movies. He did a few movies. He did a movie with Peter Ustinov. He did a movie with Dick Van Dyke for Disney called Never a Dull Moment.
Great movie.
And he loved working with, I'm so embarrassed, I can't remember his name. Ugh.
Well, there's a movie he directed I wanted to ask you about. He directed this Jerry Lewis movie called Don't Raise the Bridge, Lower the River.
Yes.
And
1968 or 67.
68, yeah. And in one of Jerry Lewis's last interviews, he called it his worst movie ever. And he didn't mention your father, but I was curious. Do you know if they had any tension on that movie?
Well, Jerry Lewis was, he didn't like taking direction.
Right.
And he wanted to be the captain of the ship. So I think my dad had to do a lot of placating with him. It was not a great movie. It was a great opportunity for my dad to bring his family to London for 6 months and that was great. But no, it wasn't a very, it was a silly movie.
Yeah.
He did How Sweet It Is, and that was with Debbie Reynolds and James Garner. That was a real type, 60s type movie. And then he did a very good movie. I think his best reviews were a movie called The Grasshopper with Jacqueline Bisset and James Brown.
James Brown?
Is that right? Jim Brown.
Oh, Jim Brown, yeah.
The boxer, the fighter.
Yeah.
And that was Gary Marshall and Jerry Belson's first movie that they wrote, and they asked my dad to direct it, and the three of them went to Vegas, and they did this, and it got very good reviews. It's not shown very often, but it was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went back to television, and he must have done 20 pilots. Some of them sold, and some of them didn't. He did The Partridge Family. He did Miss Merkel. He did The Odd Couple. He did episodes like The Munsters, and he was constantly bopping around. Then Odd Couple, they kept asking him to stay, so he stayed with The Odd Couple for a couple of years. He did The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He really did. I think he hit almost every sitcom in the 60s and 70s until Happy Days. Mm-hmm. And then Happy Days really stuck. He was very, very lucky.
Oh, yeah. He has a huge body of work. One of my favorites, oh, God, this is like one of the funniest unsold pilots ever, Evil Roy Slade.
Love that movie. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
With the wonderful John Astin. What an all-star cast. Mickey Rooney. It was
Milton Berle, Dom DeLuise.
Oh, that was so much fun for him. And all of us, I remember him making that at Paramount.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was on the other couple months ago, and I recorded it, and I watched it, and I still laughed at it. I thought it was so silly. So funny.
Yeah, his cameo as the souvenir salesman still makes me laugh every time I see it.
Right. See, he put himself in there so he could get his dues paid for.
Yeah, that show should have been a series.
Well, they tried. It was called Sheriff Who. They did a pilot with the same cast, and it didn't sell. Yeah, they tried, or maybe it was on for just a few episodes, but it didn't stick. Yeah, that was a great one.
He directed a TV movie of the week remake of Cat Ballou.
Cat Ballou, yeah. That's right, with Leslie Ann Warren. That whole Western theme was going on there. Yes, he did. I remember that. She was so nice. I was, just a kid during all this, so.
Yeah, I was mind-boggled that, they remade the movie on TV 6 years after the original, which won Lee Marvin the Academy Award.
Yeah, with Jane Fonda, right?
Right.
Yeah. He did that. He did a few of those movie of the weeks. One with Farrah Fawcett and Herschel Bernardi, and those were real popular.
Wow. When he was doing Happy Days for those 11 years, did he ever get bored of it after a while?
No, he never got bored. No, he loved it, and he loved his off time too. He loved to, get our house. We had a nice house in Pacific Palisades, and by that time my mother went back to school and got her master's and was running Kaiser Permanente. So nice. Yeah, very nice. He loved working. He never got bored. No. I think maybe he was very ready to go back to work once the season started again. He liked being on the set.
Mm-hmm. And he directed one episode of Laverne and Shirley.
Well, he did the pilot.
It was a pilot, yeah.
There was an episode of Happy Days that introduced Laverne and Shirley. And he directed that. And they were so well received that Gary Marshall proposed to Paramount, why don't we do, a spinoff, which is what they did with Mork and Mindy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he cast Mork, Robin Williams.
Yep. Oh my God, I heard Dom DeLuise was considered to play Mork. I don't think that I love Dom DeLuise, but no, that Robin Williams was Mork.
There was nobody like Robin Williams. They were absolutely dumbfounded when he walked in and he started doing his routine. Where he does the rewind?
Yeah.
He would do that. Like at the audition, he'd say, "Oh, just a minute," and he'd do the rewind voice and the movements all backward. He was a genius. He was a genius.
Yes, he was. Now comes the classics that I grew up watching over and over again so much. Police Academy 2 and 3. And I watched those movies so much growing up, drove my parents crazy. I was reading that your father was a replacement for another director. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I don't know who that was. Those questions my brother Andrew would have, because he was in those,
Mm-hmm.
He played the rookie.
Bud.
He was the brother of Colleen Camp, and he was the son of Jackie Joseph and Art Botanides. He was the one that was always, he was very tall and thin and knocking out.
Yeah, they're always punching each other.
Yeah, that's my brother Andy.
Yep.
So he worked on 2 or 3 of those police academies with a good featured role. And so he was on the set during all of that. He knows all those guys. So, I'll do my best to answer any questions I can about that. But I was actually doing theater on the East Coast at the time, so I wasn't really around that much.
But you got to play the cashier at the grocery store.
Oh, yes. I came home for one day, and I got a line.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir, you forgot your stamps.
Yeah, right.
How was shooting that scene?
Well, I had never met, what's his name? Bobby Goldthwait.
Bobcat Goldthwait, yeah.
Yeah. And he doesn't drop his character. So he was like that the entire day.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to make of him. But it was fun. It was fun working that day, and they were a lot of fun. The cast members, they were a lot of fun. But Andy, I'm gonna refer you to my brother for any other information on those.
Yeah, I gotta tell you though, last year I interviewed this actress, Monica Parker. She played one of Bobcat's gang members, and she told me that your father would just get angry whenever he saw an actor's wardrobe off kilter. And she told me on the last day of filming, when they're filming the showdown in the cave, for Bobcat's gang, everybody decided to make their wardrobe off kilter to get back at him for all the months of screaming at them. And he never noticed.
Well, that's figures.
Yeah, it's like they went through the trouble of doing this prank, and then he didn't notice it.
Yeah, there's usually a lot of pranks on sets. Yeah, they always do stuff like that.
Yeah, and David Huband, who was in part 3, he told me that there was a day where your father was freaking out because he couldn't find Bobcat, and he was just like, "Where's Bobcat? Where's Bobcat? We got to film this scene. Where is he?" And then it turns out he was sleeping in his trailer.
Oh well.
and your father had a cameo as a priest on a police lineup in part 3.
Oh gosh, yeah, he didn't even survive. He died before that movie opened, which was too bad.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, was he sick for a while when he passed?
No, they found a brain tumor, an inoperable mass malignant in his brain, and after doing a series of tests like angiograms, and so he was in the hospital, and they told him and me, I was there, my mother had already passed away, and my brothers were out of the country, and they said, you have this, and you're not going to live very long. And that night, the tumor burst in his head, and he went into a coma, and he died 9 days later.
Oh.
Very, very quick.
Oh, and he was so young, 60?
He was 60.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, my God. I wouldn't be able to fathom that, first losing your mother and then your father so young like that. Oh,
yeah, God. She was 50. She was 50, and they died 5.5 years apart. So it was mind-blowing for the three of us. But we were raised in such a solid, happy, loving family that fortunately the three of us were able to stay together and continue with our relationship, and we're still very close. Oh. And two of us have our own families, but we all live within 20 minutes of each other, and we see each other quite often.
Oh, that's wonderful. But overall, what kind of a dad was he? Was he strict at all?
No. Well, my father was like a kid. He was the Pied Piper. Every kid in the neighborhood wanted to be with him. My mother said one day a little boy of 5 years old came and knocked on the door and said, "Can Mr. Paris come out and play?" to my mother. And she said that summed it up. He was just so much fun. He loved being with young people. He was the Little League coach. I tagged along because I just wanted to be with him. He was so much fun. He would take us go-kart riding and to Randy's Donuts right before dinner. My mother would go crazy. He was just wonderful. I can't imagine having a more loving, generous, and fun and insightful father.
And who did he hang out with socially in Hollywood?
In Hollywood, who we worked with.
Like Carl Reiner and Gary Marshall and all them?
Yeah. And my mother and Gary Marshall's wife, Barbara, were close. But really, since we always lived in the Palisades, it was more neighborhood friends. Really, it was in the 60s. He was very close with Jerry Belson. He also lived up the street from us. He was very close with Jerry and Gary. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because they all had similar names.
Yeah. Yeah. And they would play ping pong every weekend and make each other laugh, and it was just a great time.
Have you or your brothers ever thought about writing a book about him?
No, I haven't. I don't know. I haven't. I've never thought about that. That's your job, isn't it? You're the writer.
I don't write biographies, but I do write.
There was a guy who wrote a lot about the Dick Van Dyke Show. I can't remember his name. He would call, 20 years ago and ask us, and I can't remember his name now. But he did some of those Dick Van Dyke Show biography, things. Mm-hmm. But no, I haven't. My brother is a special ed teacher. My other brother does tours around the country and in Hollywood. And I was an actress for a long time, and then I raised 4 children, so that kind of took up my time.
Yeah, you were in like every movie Gary Marshall directed.
Yeah, I worked for Gary a lot.
Yeah, everybody I've talked to that worked with Gary said that he was just a wonderful man, and the reason why his movies and TV shows were so successful was because he understood humanity.
He did. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. I miss him very much. He became somewhat of a surrogate father after my dad died when I was 27, until he just died a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Everybody took it hard.
Yeah.
Because he was just a brilliant man.
Yes, and kind, and worked so well with young got 8 children. He was great.
I lost it when Penny Marshall died because I thought she was a comedy genius.
Penny?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she was. She was really funny, and she didn't have such an easy life. She really didn't. She was a very good director. I'm sorry to see she didn't continue with that more.
Yeah, she was a really good director, and she could perform comedy really well too. You know.
Oh yeah, she was like Lucille Ball in Laverne and Shirley. She really did all that physical stuff. Terrific.
Yeah, I thought they were just as good as Lucy and Ethel, I think.
I know, they were great. They were great.
Yeah. Well, Julie, I thank you so much for coming on today. Your father's work was amazing and will live on for generations. You know, I mean, no matter how insane this world is getting, his work will live on.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, Tommy. Thank you. I sure enjoy turning on the TV on Turner Classic Movies and watching him pop up on the screen. It's very comforting. And thank you so much for calling.
My pleasure. And I'll get in touch with Andrew at a certain point once my schedule isn't so crazy. And I thank you so much, and have a great day, and God bless.
Thank you, you too. Thanks, Tommy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Julie Paris. Ain't she a sweetheart? Thank you so much, Julie. Your father did some wonderful work in his show business career in the golden age of show business. And like I said, his work will live on. He was a Renaissance man. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.